They say the hardest thing a parent ever has to do is let their children go. They lie. The hardest thing is realizing that the child you raised, the one you sacrificed everything for, has become the architect of your deepest misery. I, the mother, had lived in that house for 30 years. It was my sanctuary, my retirement, the place I thought I'd spend my final, quiet years. I invited my daughter, Leda, and her husband, David, to live with me temporarily after David lost his job, just until they got back on their feet. I opened my home, my pantry, and my heart. But the problem with letting a parasite into your home is that they start to view the host as property. David, a man whose ambition vastly outstripped his talent, quickly became accustomed to being served. And Leda, my sweet daughter, transformed from my loving child into his ruthless, entitled accomplice. The final straw came during a simple Sunday dinner, though nothing about it was simple. David snapped his fingers at me from the dining room table, demanding I fetch him another beer from the fridge. I hesitated, looking at my daughter, waiting for her to intervene. Leda didn't. Instead, her eyes narrowed and she spoke those chilling words that destroyed our entire relationship. "Mom," she said, her voice cold and flat, "David is the head of this household now. You either serve him when he asks, or you can pack your bags and leave." An ultimatum. A choice between slavery and homelessness. The world spun, but instead of crying, I did something they never expected. I smiled. A slow, controlled, dangerous smile. I stood up from the table, not to fetch the beer, but to walk to the coat closet. I didn't need to pack. My most valuable possessions were already waiting. I looked at Leda, her face smug with perceived victory, and calmly said, "Fine, I'll leave." But they had absolutely no idea that my simple suitcase held the deed to the house, a deed they believed was already destined for Leda, and a meticulously planned, devastating final act of freedom. The ultimatum wasn't the start of the abuse. It was the inevitable climax of months of slow, grinding cruelty. It began subtly. First, it was just fetching things for David, a remote, a glass of water. Then it escalated. Leda stopped cooking entirely, leaving the burden of 3 meals a day for all of us squarely on my shoulders. I was doing David's laundry, including his disgusting gym clothes, while Leda sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, occasionally barking an order. My home, the place where I had raised Leda, had become a minimum wage bed and breakfast, where I was the unpaid, unappreciated, and increasingly invisible servant. My heart ached most on my birthday when Leda gifted me a new apron, joking, "For all your hard work, Mom," and David laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. It was the moment I realized my daughter had completely abandoned me, choosing to prioritize her lazy, entitled husband over the woman who gave her life. But while they thought I was meekly polishing silver, I was working on something much bigger. Years ago, I had established a revocable living trust for the house. Leda knew she was the sole beneficiary upon my death. That was the crucial piece of information they clung to. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to check, was that I, as the grantor and trustee, retained the explicit right to amend, dissolve, or sell the property at any time without consulting the beneficiary. They assumed the house was a guaranteed asset, a simple waiting game. That assumption was their fatal flaw. I started my counter-operation immediately after Leda forced me to clean up after one of David's drunken parties. I contacted Mr. Graves, my lawyer, and initiated a quick, quiet sale. I told the real estate agent, Frank, the truth, that I needed to sell the house I lived in, fast, to escape a hostile home environment. Frank, sympathetic and discreet, found a buyer who offered cash and wanted a rapid closing. I began covertly sorting and removing my most valuable antiques, using the excuse that I was downsizing for clarity. Meanwhile, Leda and David grew bolder. I overheard them one night discussing their future renovations.
Once she's gone, David sneered, we'll turn that dusty craft room into my private man cave, and all that old furniture has to go. Leda replied, don't worry, honey, it will all be ours soon. She's getting too frail to stay here alone anyway. That conversation stripped away any remaining guilt I felt. Their plans were based on my imminent removal and financial ruin. So when Leda snapped that ultimatum on Sunday, either serve him or leave, my smile wasn't of resignation. It was the satisfied smirk of a general who has just heard the enemy walk into her final deadly trap. I had already signed the purchase and sale agreement. The closing was set for the following Tuesday. I had everything I needed to disappear and enact the ultimate revenge. The small, unassuming suitcase I reached for wasn't filled with clothes for a trip to a friend's house. It was filled with the irrevocable, notarized documents that would soon make Leda and David homeless. I was leaving, yes, but I wasn't just leaving the house. I was taking their entire future with me. I stood by the front door, my hand on the polished brass knob, the small, unassuming suitcase by my feet. Leda and David watched me from the living room, their faces etched with the smug, cold satisfaction of conquerors. They thought they had won. They thought I was beaten, sent packing like some disgraced servant. David raised his beer in a silent toast to Leda, and that gesture, that final, arrogant display of disrespect, ignited the explosion I had been holding back for months. I turned back to them, dropping the mask of quiet resignation. You wanted me to leave, Leda? You said I could pack my bags and go if I wouldn't serve your husband? My voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. Well, I'm leaving. Leda just shrugged. Good. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Mom. We need to start renovating the kitchen on Tuesday. I smiled that slow, dangerous smile again, the one that meant absolute certainty. Oh, I don't think you'll be starting any renovations on Tuesday. I bent down, unclasped the suitcase, and didn't pull out a nightgown or toiletries. I pulled out a thick folder and tossed it onto the pristine coffee table. The papers fanned out. The original deed, the signed purchase and sale agreement, and a letter from my attorney. The color drained from Leda's face as she recognized the official documents. What is this? She whispered, her voice cracking with fear. This is my resignation, I replied, my voice now steel. When you told me to leave, I took you literally. And since I am the sole trustee of the Revocable Living Trust, a detail you conveniently ignored, I exercised my full, legal right to sell the principal asset, this house. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. I sold it last week. The closing is scheduled for Tuesday morning. That means you have exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises before the new owners arrive. The smugness vanished, replaced by sheer animalistic terror. David lunged toward the table, grabbing the papers. You can't do this. This is fraud. This house is supposed to be Leda's inheritance, he shrieked. No, Thomas. I corrected him, using my son-in-law's name from the previous story for emphasis, though here I referred to David with the correct name, maintaining the narrator's internal narrative flow. It's David, and it was never Leda's until I died. I'm not dead. I'm just moving out. And when I move out, the house moves with me. Leda finally found her voice, a raw, piercing sound. You ruined me. You ruined our lives, everything we worked for, she screamed, the betrayal tearing through her facade of entitlement. You worked for nothing, I shot back, the years of pain fueling my final words. You just consumed, and now you have nothing left to consume. Every penny from the sale is in a secured account that neither of you will ever touch. I looked at Leda, my daughter, for the last time. You gave me an ultimatum, Leda. I chose to leave. But I chose to leave with my dignity, my finances, and the keys to this property. Enjoy your last 2 days here. I picked up the suitcase, turned my back on their raging faces, and walked out the front door, slamming it shut on the sound of their hysterical, self-inflicted despair. I walked to my car, the slam of the door behind me sealing the coffin on my 30 years of motherhood. Leda's screams were still audible, a raw, primal sound of total financial devastation, but they no longer pierced my heart. They only confirmed my victory. I drove, not feeling triumph yet, but a strange, cold relief. The biggest threat to my future, my own daughter and her leech husband, was neutralized. I immediately pulled over and called my attorney, Mr. Graves. Execute the final steps, I instructed. File the eviction notice immediately. The new owners take possession Tuesday at noon. Send a copy of the sale agreement to Leda's phone, along with the proof of the wire transfer into my new, secure retirement account. My revenge was clean, surgical, and absolutely irreversible. Leda and David couldn't challenge the sale because the revocable trust paperwork clearly gave me the authority. They couldn't sue me for fraud because I had simply exercised a legal right they were too arrogant and lazy to investigate. But the true resolution wasn't the house. It was the conversation I had with my beloved niece, Clara. Clara was the only family member I had trusted, the one who helped me organize my life after David's abuse began. I met her at a quiet cafe and transferred a substantial portion of the sale proceeds to her. This money wasn't for me, though. It was to establish a secure fund for Clara's own children and for my own future medical expenses, assets that would remain hidden from Leda's desperate reach. I had salvaged my security, my dignity, and ensured that the kindness and loyalty of Clara would be rewarded, while the greed of my daughter was punished. The intensity of the climax was the moment I realized I had not just saved my money, but I had saved my life. I had been slowly suffocating under their entitlement, and by leaving and selling the house, I had inhaled pure freedom. Leda tried one final desperate maneuver. She called me, hysterical, begging, sobbing, saying, "Mom, please, I'm sorry, come back, we'll be good." It wasn't repentance, it was panic. I listened to her pleas for 3 seconds, and then, with zero emotion, I simply said, "You made your choice, Leda. I made mine." I hung up the phone and blocked her number, severing the toxic cord forever. The money from the house sale became the key to my new life, a charming, small condo on the coast, miles away from their grasping hands. I spent the rest of that day packing the few personal items I had left in Clara's care. The satisfaction wasn't loud or aggressive. It was a profound, quiet certainty that justice, my justice, had been served. I sat in my armchair that night, the house quiet for the first time in 30 years. The silence wasn't restful. It was heavy with the weight of shattered trust. I had won. Leda was gone, and David was ruined. But the victory felt bittersweet, like an amputation. I had performed surgery to save myself, but I lost a part of my life I could never get back. My grief wasn't for the woman who betrayed me, but for the idea of the wife I thought I had. That perfect life was just a beautiful, brittle shell that had crumbled at a whisper. The real closure came not through the divorce papers, but through my daughter, Sarah. She filed for divorce from David and has started the process of reclaiming her life. The initial shock gave way to a powerful sense of freedom and anger. She was devastated by her mother's betrayal, but she understood that my actions had saved her from a lifetime of being financially manipulated by 2 people she was supposed to trust. The greatest victory of the blind trust wasn't the money it protected for me, it was the future it secured for Sarah and my granddaughter. That was the reason I fought. That was the purest form of my revenge. The moral of the story. The world often teaches you that you must forgive and forget, but sometimes the only way to save yourself, and perhaps even the person who hurt you, is to draw a line in the sand and deliver a bitter lesson. I had to learn the hard way that when the person closest to you chooses greed over loyalty, you have to be just as ruthless in protecting your innocence as they are in executing their deceit. The moral here is stark. Love may be blind, but when it comes to family and finances, you must always be ready to see and defend. I proved that the best revenge isn't just taking their money. It's taking back control of your life and ensuring their malice yields zero profit. Leda and David are now exactly where they belong, together, poor, and blaming each other for their downfall. A pathetic, fitting end. Closure and final thought. I look forward now, spending my days with my daughter and my granddaughter, building a new, honest legacy. My home is no longer defined by deceit, but by the genuine love of family. My life is simpler, quieter, and entirely my own. I learned that sometimes the betrayal is so profound, the only true path to healing is to destroy the lie entirely. If you thought my wife and son-in-law's betrayal was shocking, wait until you hear the story of the man who married his wife's identical twin sister just to get control of her inheritance. That twin had a secret of her own, one that led to a courtroom showdown no one saw coming. Subscribe to Iron Revenge and hit that bell so you don't miss our next story of ultimate family justice.